Hey everyone, Trevor Noah here. So, remember Donald Trump? Yeah, the guy with the hair and the tweets? Well, one of his big things was tariffs. Tariffs, for those who might not know, are essentially taxes on imported goods. The idea is to make foreign products more expensive, so people in the US would buy American-made stuff instead. Sounds simple, right? But the reality is a bit more complicated. Trump slapped these tariffs on goods from all over the world, saying it would bring back jobs to America. But did it work? The idea was to protect American industries from foreign competition. By making imported goods more expensive, American consumers would ideally turn to domestically produced alternatives. This, in theory, would boost local manufacturing and create jobs. But the question remains, did it actually achieve these goals? And what about the impact on other countries? When the US imposes tariffs, it doesn't just affect American consumers and businesses, it sends shockwaves through the global economy. Today, we're diving into the world of Trump's tariffs and how they shook things up, especially in Africa. Africa, a continent with emerging markets and economies, felt the impact in unique ways. African countries, many of which rely heavily on exports to the US, found themselves in a challenging position. The tariffs made their goods more expensive and less competitive in the American market. Buckle up, it's about to get interesting. Now, tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods. Trump's idea was to make foreign products more expensive, so people in the US would buy American-made stuff instead. Sounds simple, right? But the reality is a bit more complicated. These tariffs had a ripple effect across the globe, hitting some countries harder than others. For instance, American consumers started to feel the pinch as prices for everyday items began to rise. Everything from electronics to clothing saw price hikes, making life a bit more expensive for the average American. On the flip side, some American industries did see a boost. Steel and aluminum manufacturers, for example, benefited from reduced foreign competition. However, this came at a cost. Other industries that rely on imported materials saw their costs rise, leading to a complex web of economic consequences. These tariffs had a ripple effect across the globe, hitting some countries harder than others. Countries that were heavily dependent on exports to the US found themselves scrambling to find new markets and adjust their economic strategies. In Africa, the impact was particularly pronounced. Many African nations export raw materials and agricultural products to the US. With the tariffs in place, these goods became more expensive and less attractive to American buyers. This led to a decrease in demand, which in turn affected local economies. Farmers and manufacturers in Africa faced reduced income and increased uncertainty. The tariffs also strained diplomatic relations, as countries sought to negotiate exemptions or new trade deals. So, while the intention behind the tariffs was to protect American jobs and industries, the actual outcome was a mixed bag. Some sectors benefited while others struggled, and the global repercussions were far-reaching, affecting economies and livelihoods around the world. As we continue to navigate the complexities of global trade, it's clear that policies like tariffs have far-reaching consequences. They can reshape economies, alter trade relationships, and impact everyday lives in ways that are often unexpected. So, the next time you hear about tariffs in the news, remember that it's not just about taxes on goods, it's about a web of economic interactions that span the globe, affecting everyone from factory workers in America to farmers in Africa. Thanks for tuning in, and stay curious about the world around you. Let's start with Nigeria, Africa's largest economy. This vibrant nation, known for its rich culture and diverse population, is also a powerhouse when it comes to natural resources. Among these resources, oil stands out as the crown jewel. Nigeria's oil industry is not just a significant part of its economy, it's the lifeblood that fuels various sectors from public services to infrastructure development. Nigeria is a major oil exporter with vast reserves that have attracted global attention. The oil fields in the Niger Delta are some of the most productive in the world, and the country has invested heavily in refining and exporting this valuable commodity. And guess what? A big chunk of that oil goes straight to the US of A. The relationship between Nigeria and the United States in the oil sector has been mutually beneficial for decades. American refineries rely on Nigerian crude to meet their production needs, and this trade has helped stabilize Nigeria's economy. But with Trump's tariffs, things got a little messy. The tariffs were part of a broader trade policy aimed at protecting American industries, but they had unintended consequences for international partners. For Nigeria, these tariffs meant that their oil became subject to higher import duties, making it less competitive in the American market. See, these tariffs made Nigerian oil more expensive for American buyers. The price hike wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it significantly altered the dynamics of the oil trade. American companies started looking for cheaper alternatives, and this shift in demand caused fluctuations in global oil prices. And when something gets pricier, people tend to buy less of it. This basic economic principle hit Nigeria hard. The reduced demand from one of their biggest customers led to a surplus of oil that they struggled to sell elsewhere. This put Nigeria in a tough spot. The oil industry employs thousands of workers, and the sudden drop in demand threatened their livelihoods. Government officials scrambled to find new markets and negotiate better terms, but the impact was already being felt across the nation. Oil is a huge part of their economy, and suddenly, their biggest customer was buying less. This wasn't just a minor setback, it was a significant blow to the national revenue. The government had to rethink its budget, cutting back on essential services and delaying infrastructure projects. This meant less money for Nigeria, which could trickle down and affect everything from government spending to everyday people's lives. Public services like healthcare and education faced budget cuts, and the overall quality of life for many Nigerians began to decline. It's like when your friend orders the most expensive thing on the menu, and then you have to split the bill evenly. Suddenly, you're paying more than you expected, and it throws off your entire budget. For Nigeria, the tariffs were that unexpected expense, and the whole country had to bear the cost. Not cool, Trump. Not cool. The tariffs may have been intended to protect American interests, but they ended up causing a ripple effect that hurt economies far beyond the U.S. borders. For Nigeria, the challenge now is to adapt and find new ways to sustain its economy in a rapidly changing global landscape. Next up, we've got South Africa, another powerhouse on the continent. They were also hit with tariffs, but their story is a bit different. You see, South Africa exports a lot of different things to the U.S., from cars to fruits and veggies. So, while the tariffs did sting a little, they weren't a knockout punch. South Africa's response was pretty measured. They didn't go all out with retaliatory tariffs, but they also didn't just sit back and take it. Instead, they started looking for new trading partners like China and other Asian countries. It's like that old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially when that basket belongs to a tariff-happy president. But it wasn't just the big boys like Nigeria and South Africa feeling the heat. Smaller economies like Madagascar were also caught in the crossfire. Madagascar is known for its vanilla, and guess what? The U.S. is a major importer of vanilla. You know, for all those fancy lattes and ice cream. Trump's tariffs made Madagascan vanilla more expensive in the U.S., which meant American businesses started looking for cheaper alternatives. This hurt Madagascar's vanilla industry and the livelihoods of the farmers who depend on it. It's a classic example of how these tariffs had unintended consequences, impacting people far beyond America's borders. Section 5, South Sudan, a visa dilemma. Now let's switch gears and talk about South Sudan. This country, which gained its independence in 2011, has been through a lot in its short history. From civil wars to economic struggles, the people of South Sudan have faced numerous challenges. But one of the more recent issues that has added to their woes is the visa dilemma with the United States. Remember them? The world's youngest nation still grappling with conflict and instability. Despite the hope and optimism that came with independence, South Sudan has been mired in internal conflict, which has displaced millions and created a humanitarian crisis. The streets of Juba, the capital, tell a story of resilience amidst adversity. People go about their daily lives, trying to make the best of a difficult situation. Well, on top of all that, Trump decided to revoke visas for South Sudanese citizens. This decision came as a shock to many, especially those who had family members in the U.S. or were planning to travel for education or work. The move was seen as a significant blow to the already strained relations between the two countries. Yeah, talk about adding insult to injury. The visa revocation left many South Sudanese citizens in a state of distress. Protests erupted outside the U.S. Embassy in Juba, with people expressing their frustration and disappointment. For many, the U.S. represented a beacon of hope and opportunity, and this decision felt like a door being slammed shut. The official reason? South Sudan wasn't cooperating with the U.S. on deportations. The U.S. government claimed that South Sudan was not taking back its citizens who had been ordered to leave the U.S. This lack of cooperation was cited as the primary reason for the visa ban. However, many questioned whether this was a justified response. Basically, they weren't taking back their citizens who had been ordered to leave the U.S. This created a complex situation where individuals who had built lives in the U.S. were suddenly in limbo. Families were torn apart, and dreams were put on hold. The airports became scenes of emotional farewells as people were forced to return to a country still grappling with its own challenges. Now, whether that justified a blanket visa ban is a whole other debate. Critics argued that the decision was too harsh and did not take into account the individual circumstances of those affected. The political debate raged on, with some supporting the move as a necessary measure and others condemning it as an overreach. But the point is, this move further strained relations between the two countries. Diplomatic efforts to resolve the issue were met with tension and mistrust. Meetings between officials were marked by a lack of consensus, and the once hopeful relationship between the US and South Sudan seemed to be deteriorating, and made it even harder for South Sudanese people to travel to the US, whether for work, study, or to reunite with family. The visa ban had far-reaching consequences, affecting students who had secured scholarships, professionals with job offers, and families hoping to reunite with loved ones. The uncertainty and disruption caused by this decision were felt deeply by the South Sudanese community, whether for work, study, or to reunite with family. The impact of the visa dilemma continues to be a significant issue for South Sudanese citizens, highlighting the complexities of international relations and the human cost of political decisions. As the situation evolves, the hope remains that a resolution can be found that respects the dignity and aspirations of those affected. Section 6. Shifting Sands, Africa looks east. So with all these tariffs and visa issues, it's no surprise that many African countries started looking for new friends. And who better to turn to than China, the rising superpower with deep pockets and a growing presence in Africa. China was more than happy to step in and fill the void left by the US. They offered loans, investments, and trade deals, strengthening their ties with African nations. This shift towards China wasn't just about economics, though. It was also about sending a message. Hey America, you might not be the only game in town anymore. Section 7. The price of protectionism. Now some people might argue that Trump's tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries, but at what cost? Sure, some American businesses might have benefited, but others were hurt by higher prices for imported materials. And let's not forget about the consumers who ended up paying more for everyday goods. The truth is, protectionism often comes with a hefty price tag. It can lead to trade wars, hurt global economic growth, and damage relationships between countries. And in the case of Trump's tariffs, it's hard to argue that the benefits outweighed the costs. Section 8. A New World Order. So, what does all this mean for the future? Well, it's clear that Trump's policies have left their mark on the world. They've accelerated the shift in global power dynamics, with China emerging as a major player on the world stage. And they've forced countries to rethink their alliances and trade relationships. We're living in a multipolar world now where no single country calls all the shots. And while this presents challenges, it also creates opportunities for collaboration and cooperation. The question is, will countries seize these opportunities, or will they retreat into their corners and risk further division? Section 9. Conclusion, Uncertain Futures. So, there you have it, folks. The story of Trump's tariffs and their impact on Africa is a complex one with no easy answers. It's a story about economics, politics, and the delicate balance of power on a global scale. As for the future, well, that's still being written. But one thing's for sure, the world is changing and we're all along for the ride. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting.